course, the breaking news at this hour right now on the Iran nuclear talks. U.S. officials planning to stay in Vienna past the end of the month deadline. They say this is not a long-term extension, just a, quote, few extra days. This coming as Iran's foreign minister heads back to Tehran to talk things over with his government. He's expected to meet with Secretary of State John Kerry again tomorrow. Could a deal still happen by Tuesday or this upcoming week? Joining me right now is the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, California Congressman Ed Royce. Congressman, good to have you on the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Tell us what the thinking is behind this extending the deadline past Tuesday for a few more days.
Well, the difficulty is that so far Iran has turned down all of the 4 key objectives that the United States had in this agreement, including having inspectors on military bases and the ability to go anywhere, anytime for those international inspectors. That has flatly been turned down by the Ayatollah, and so the consultation obviously will be with the supreme leader. But at the same time, every other key objective has been turned down. The agreement now would apparently lift sanctions at the front end instead of at the back end of the agreement, thus giving Iran an enormous amount of money. And the IAEA will not get their 12 questions answered about Iran's ongoing nuclear program, the tests they've already done. So this has been quite a blunder so far in terms of our handling of the negotiation on the U.S. side.
So we are loosening up the early on sanctions at the top of it, you said, and yet we're not getting any clarity in terms of U.S. inspectors checking on what they are doing with regard to nuclear capabilities.
The international inspectors apparently will not have the ability to go onto military bases, and this is the same problem we had with the North Korean agreement. In the North Korean agreement, the inability to actually access sites led to North Korea getting a nuclear weapon. And the last element of this is one that really even created angst among Obama's inner circles of former Iran advisors. If you saw the open letter that they wrote last week to try to push back, they said this agreement will not prevent Iran from having nuclear weapons capability. And that's the concern of many of the experts and the former inspectors, current inspectors who are looking at this, is that this agreement is not really going to be able to constrain Iran in the least. As a matter of fact, the Ayatollah continues to say, death to America. You know, in his speeches, he begins them that way in the morning and then launches a fresh assault about how they're not going to be constrained in terms of the agreement.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't understand what a few more days is going to do, given that one of the most important, rules to follow are those inspections, and we're not actually getting that agreement. So stay with us, Congressman. We've got to talk about that. Ed Royce with us this morning. The nuclear negotiations with Iran heading into the home stretch right now, with the deadline expected this Tuesday, although now we know that it is being extended for a few more days. Will world leaders be able to beat this ticking clock and overcome these major obstacles to reach any deal? Fox News' senior correspondent Eric Shawn with that angle right now. Eric, good morning to you.
Good morning, Maria, and good morning, everyone. What will the Supreme Leader say? You know, after repeated delays and the continued uncertainty, the talks will now stretch into the next week, still with no guarantee they will actually be successful. In Vienna, they speak of hope, despite the major gaps that remain on a variety of issues.
We have a lot of hard work to do. There's some very tough issues, and I think we all look forward to getting down to the final effort here to see whether or not a deal is possible.
I agree. Maybe not on the issues, but on the fact that we need to work really hard in order to be able to make progress and move forward.
Well, despite their protestations of optimism, more potential deal breakers come from Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. No inspections of military sites, no interviews with Iranian nuclear scientists, no 10-year nuclear restrictions, which, by the way, has already been agreed to, and the lifting of all sanctions immediately when that deal is signed. Critics predict that would help Iran further fund terrorism and say the White House needs to heed the warnings of the Iranian opposition, like the group, the National Council of Resistance of Iran. Instead of relying on Tehran's claims, it does not want to develop a nuclear bomb.
The fact that the administration doesn't embrace them, I believe, comes from the fact that they are willing to do this agreement with Iran at any cost to anybody, so long as they can have some kind of an agreement with Iran and paint it as a victory. And they are putting the lives of these people in jeopardy. They're putting the lives of every single person in Israel in jeopardy. And ultimately, I think they're putting our lives in jeopardy.
Well, the key deadline now slipping further up against a July 9th date. That's when the agreement has to be submitted for congressional review. So as of now, what will be in it still remains anyone's guess. Maria?
All right, Eric, thanks very much. And we are talking this morning with House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Ed Royce about this. Congressman, what about the extra few days? If we cannot get them to agree to these regular inspections of their nuclear activity today, why is extending this deadline going into July a good idea? Why do we think we'll have a different outcome?
You know, I think this is all the zeal for the deal. We saw the same attitudes in dealing with the North Korean regime at the time. One of the same negotiators, chief negotiators, is working on this project that worked on that one. The warnings were there. The warning signs were there. Without verification, without the ability to have international inspectors go onto those military sites and be able to get the questions answered, without the ability to talk to those Iranian scientists, this wouldn't be worth the paper it is written on, and the result would be the same as the North Korean agreement. So I think now is the time for the United States to push back. The administration has had a warning. I sent a letter with 367 co-authors on that letter to the president's desk. That's the vast majority of the House, saying the four things that need to be in this agreement, and I detailed them, they're not in that agreement.
Yep.
We need to push back now with the international community and get verification, because at this point we don't have it.
We're still waiting on any response to that letter. Let me ask you, let me switch gears, ask you about another deadline, and that is this Tuesday as well, and that is Greece is expected to either default or pay the IMF $1.8 billion that it owes. Now, what we're hearing this morning, headlines crossing on this as well, the finance minister of Greece is suggesting they won't make the payment. They are not going to have the money to pay the IMF the $1.8 billion. That would be the first time a developed country defaults to the IMF. What are the implications of Greece missing that deadline and perhaps leaving the euro?
Well, as Margaret Thatcher said, sooner or later the problem with socialism is that you run out of other people's money. And in Greece, they refuse to cut, you know, the pensions. They refuse to change their leftist ideology in terms of their spending. And as a consequence, I think the consequences will be that Greece looks likely at this point to leave the euro. And I think the danger of that is that there are other left-wing governments in Europe that might follow suit in Southern Europe, and that would lead to a very consequential impact, you know, for the euro and for the and frankly create more instability in the region. It is a pity that Greece does not get its act together.
We've got these pictures of people trying furiously to take their money out of the banks. The other headline that I want to read to you this morning, Congressman, is the European Central Bank says it refuses to increase the amount of loans that it's giving to Greece. It says it's keeping the emergency loans to Greek banks unchanged, and that's at Friday's level. It says it will work closely with Greek Central Bank to maintain financial stability, and it's closely monitoring the situation and potential implications for monetary policy. The ECB says, I'm done. I'm not giving any more money here. Are we going to have a real market disruption come Monday morning, given the fact that these headlines are breaking with all these people in Greece trying to get their money out of the banks?
Well, what you have in Greece with that hard left government are economic illiterates. Now they say they might put something on the ballot for the populace to vote for, but they've strung this out so long without doing the responsible adjustments in terms of, you know, their legacy costs or their social spending, that I don't know that they can turn it around. And certainly they haven't shown the attitude with this, let's call it, hard left government to face up to the consequences. So it could be consequential for Europe.
Yeah, and this will certainly be the market-moving news tomorrow morning for business and markets. Sir, good to have you on the show this morning. Thanks so much.
Good to be with you.
Congressman Ed Royce joining us this morning.